FX heavy tires on gravel. Distant diesel engine. The equipment truck came up the lane at 6:42 in the morning. Maribel saw it through the kitchen window before she heard it. A white rollback truck, amber light turning in the grey dawn, tires grinding over the frozen ruts of the farm lane. Pause. She was standing in her father's kitchen, wearing his brown chore coat. It hung too wide on her shoulders, and smelled faintly of diesel, hay dust, and the peppermint gum he kept in the left pocket. She had put it on without thinking, because grief makes a person reach for whatever is nearest, and because she had not yet learned how to walk through this house without touching what used to be his. FX truck door opens, boots on gravel. The driver stepped down from the truck with a clipboard in his hand. He was maybe 26, polite in the careful way people get when they realize the customer is not really having a normal morning. He looked at the shed, then at Mara. "I'm here for the Magnum." Mara nodded. "North Bay," she said. The tractor sat where her father had parked it 3 weeks before his last hospital stay. A red case I-it Magnum 340, bought new 9 months earlier for $286,500. It had 53 hours on it. The cab still had the dealer tag hanging from the ignition key, because her father had joked that leaving it there made the machine feel younger. The driver stopped when he saw it. "This thing is barely broken in." "No," Mara said. "It isn't." He glanced at his paperwork. "You sure you want it gone today?" Mara looked at the tractor. Then she looked at the empty workbench where her father's gloves still lay palm up, as if he had just taken them off and stepped outside for a minute. Quietly, "My father was sure," she said. That was all she could say without her voice changing. FX winch cable tightens. Low hydraulic whine by 8:10. The Magnum was chained, winched, and rolling backward onto the truck. By 8:25, the first neighbor had seen the empty space in the Bell equipment shed. By noon, half of Cedar County had heard a version of the story. Dale Bell had been buried on Monday afternoon. On Tuesday morning, his daughter sold his favorite tractor. Pause. The sentence moved fast because it was simple, and because simple sentences travel better than true ones. Nobody said it to Mara's face at first. They did not have to. They said it at the feed counter. They said it at church, with softer voices. They said it in kitchen windows while coffee cooled. They said she had been away too long. They said she had come home from Kansas City with spreadsheets instead of sense. They said a man works 40 years to build a place, and his child starts selling it before the flowers die. The part they knew was true. Mara had sold the tractor the morning after the funeral. The part they did not know was that her father had ordered the sale from a hospital bed 11 days before he died. Walter Bell was 65 when the doctor used the word aggressive. It was bile duct cancer, already spread where surgery could not reach. Walter listened to the oncologist in Joplin, with the still face of a man hearing a weather report he could not change. When the doctor finished, Walter asked how much time he had if treatment worked. The doctor did not answer quickly enough. That told Walter most of what he needed. For the next 2 days, while his sister sat in the hospital room and Mara drove back and forth from the farm, Walter asked for the farm laptop, the bank folder, and the yellow ledger he kept in the bottom drawer of his office desk. Mara thought he was distracting himself. Lauer, he was not. He was measuring the hole his absence would leave. The Bell farm was 560 acres of Cedar County ground, part row crop, part cow, calf, part hay. Walter had built it over 30, 8 years by buying ugly parcels that drained badly, fixing them slowly, and never replacing equipment until the old iron had earned its retirement twice. Then, the year before he got sick, he bought the Magnum. He had wanted one new machine in his life that did not come with somebody else's repairs. Hidden inside it, he had the credit. Grain prices had looked strong. The old tractor had been starting hard in cold weather. The purchase had made sense to everyone, including Mara, until Walter did the math without Walter. The land note still carried $518,000. The equipment debt was $366,000. The operating line sat at $247,000 after fertilizer, seed, 2 veterinary bills, and a dry summer that forced them to buy hay they had expected to cut themselves. The Magnum note was $171,800 at 6.4%. That number bothered Walter more than any other number on the page. Not because it was the one debt that could be removed cleanly. The farm could not remove land. It could not remove seed. It could not remove cattle feed, or diesel, or insurance. It could, if it had to, remove a tractor that was beautiful, useful, and too new to justify its own weight under a smaller labor force. Walter ran the projection 3 times. Mara found the pages later, each one written in pencil, each one arriving at the same ugly answer. Without him, the farm would lose roughly 28% of its working capacity the first year. Not because Mara was incompetent, because Walter had been doing the work of 2 men for so long that even the people who loved him had stopped counting it. Repairs, hauling, fence, late, night calving checks, custom work he did himself instead of hiring, timing decisions that saved 3 hours here, a fuel run there, a missed rain by half a day. The farm did not just lose a father when Walter died. It lost the unpaid labor hidden inside him. With the Magnum note still attached, the farm went cash, flow negative by late summer. Without it, the farm could breathe. Not thrive, not relax. Breathe. On the 3rd night in the hospital, Walter told Mara. She was sitting beside him with a paper cup of bad coffee, pretending not to watch the monitor. He said, "When I'm gone, you sell the red tractor." Mara looked at him like he had mispronounced something. "What? The Magnum Call Granger implement?" "Tell Roy Granger," I said. "He is to buy it back straight." "Dad, no, Mara." He did not raise his voice. Walter had never needed volume when certainty would do. "The day after the funeral," he said. "Not the week after, not after Thanksgiving. The day after. Before people start holding meetings in your kitchen." She stared at him. "You love that tractor." "I like that tractor," he said. "I love the farm." Quietly, her hand tightened around the coffee cup. "We can find another way." I spent 2 days looking. 2 days isn't enough. It is when the math stops moving. He reached for the yellow ledger on the hospital tray. His hand shook a little, and that frightened her more than the words. The land can carry itself. The cattle can carry themselves if you cut the winter feed tighter. The North Bottom can gain back money if you fix the water problem. But that note on the Magnum is a stone in the bucket. You can haul 1 stone. You cannot haul that one while you're learning to carry everything else. Mara was quiet. Walter turned his head toward her. "Listen to me. People will say you sold it too fast. They will say grief made you foolish. They will say I would never have wanted it. Let them talk. You want me to say nothing. I want you to make the right decision and not ask the county to bless it." She looked down. He added, softer, "Porch Talk is not a board of directors." Beat. That was the closest Walter Bell ever came to poetry. So on Tuesday morning, when the truck came for the Magnum, Mara did what he had told her to do. She signed the papers. She watched the red tractor leave. She walked back into the shed and stood in the first bay after the sound of the truck had faded. SFX distant truck fading. Shed ambience. The space looked wrong. It also looked like oxygen. For 9 days, Mara explained nothing. She let the phone ring. She answered the bank, the veterinarian, and the hay supplier. She ignored people who began their messages with, "Honey, I'm just worried." She did not correct stories in rooms she had not entered. She did not defend a decision that had already been paid for in a hospital bed. But silence has a cost. The casseroles stopped arriving. At church, 2 women who had cried at Walter's funeral touched Mara's elbow and then looked over her shoulder as if someone else had just called them. A cousin asked whether she was planning to sell the hayground next. A man at the co-op told her, with a smile that tried to hide itself, that new equipment sure held value if you sold it quick enough. Mara went home with feed receipts in her coat pocket and sat in her truck for 10 minutes before she could make herself turn the key. On the 10th morning, Ruth Kincaid came to the house. Ruth owned the farm west of the Bell place with her husband Amos. She was 68, narrow-eyed, practical, and not easy to impress. She and Walter had shared fence, borrowed augers, argued over runoff, traded pasture during drought, and once gone 6 months without speaking over a bull that broke 2 gates and won friendship before eventually repairing both. Ruth knocked once and opened the storm door. Mara, in the kitchen. Ruth came in holding a loaf of bread wrapped in foil. She set it on the counter, but did not take off her coat. "I am not here to gossip," she said. "That means gossip brought you. It brought everyone. I'm the one who came to the door." Mara gave a tired smile despite herself. Ruth sat at the kitchen table. "Tell me one thing," she said. "Did Walter tell you to sell that tractor?" Mara looked at her. "Yes." Ruth's expression changed, not softened, sharpened. "Why?" "Because the note would break the farm without him." The note. 171, 8, 6.47 years. He ran the whole farm without his labor in the projection. It didn't work. Ruth took that in. "Did you run it?" "After the funeral." And he was right. Ruth sat back. Her eyes moved around the kitchen, taking in the ledger on the counter. The stack of envelopes. Walter's cap still hanging by the basement door. "Why didn't you say that?" "Because he told me not to." "That sounds like him," he said. "If I started asking the county to approve my decisions, I'd never stop." Ruth looked at Mara for a long time. Then she said, "He was right about that too." That afternoon, Ruth told Amos. Amos told no one for 2 days, which for Amos was an act of restraint. By the end of the week, the gossip had not disappeared, but it had begun to split. One version still said Mara had sold her father's tractor out of panic. Another version said Walter Bell had made one last hard decision, and his daughter had been strong enough to obey it. Mara did not know any of this yet. She was in the farm office, opening the drawer she had avoided since the funeral. Walter's office was a small room off the mudroom with a metal desk, 2 file cabinets, a shelf of parts manuals, and a window facing the machine shed. It had the kind of order that looked messy to everyone except the man who built it. Mara had been going in only when necessary. Bills, insurance, banky. That day she was looking for the sprayer service records. She opened the middle drawer and found a green 3-ring binder with her name written on tape across the front. Mara, when you need it. She sat in Walter's chair first. The binder was not sentimental. There was no long goodbye on the first page. No favorite memories. No speech about courage. It was a farm manual. A brutal, loving, practical farm manual. The first tab said cash flow without me. The second said cattle rotation. Then equipment priority, north bottom water. Bank contacts. Who to trust. Mara flipped to who to trust first, because even grief has curiosity. Walter had written 2 pages on neighbors, buyers, contractors, lenders, and which people gave advice because they knew things, versus which people gave advice because silence made them nervous. Under Ruth Kincaid, he had written, Ruth will argue before she helps. Let her. She is testing the post before leaning on it. Explain after you have acted, not before, worth having on your side. Mara put one hand over her mouth. Then she turned to North Bottom water. The North Bottom was 48 acres that had underperformed for 5 seasons. It looked fertile from the road, but water held under the surface after heavy rain, and by June, the crop always showed the same pale streaking along the low line near the creek. Walter had written the history by year, yield maps, soil compaction notes, 2 failed surface fixes, a tile drainage estimate from a contractor in Stockton named Eli Voss, cost $31,600 if done before spring rush. Expected gain 18 to 24% on that field. Payback 3 years if corn prices hold moderate. Faster if hay purchase drops. Then, in the margin, he had written, do this before buying anything shiny. Mara laughed once. It came out like a sob. She read for 3 hours. She read until the winter light went blue in the window, and the shed outside became a dark shape against the yard. The first bay was still empty, but now the emptiness had a different meaning. It was not proof that she had betrayed him. It was the space he had made for the next decision. By February, Mara had stopped waiting for the farm to feel like hers. She began working as if it already was. She called Eli Voss and walked the North Bottom with him in a cold wind while he pointed with a shovel and said near. She tightened the winter feed schedule. Sold 9 cows. Walter had marked as borderline and renegotiated a hay delivery instead of pretending pride could fill a manger. She attended the county farm meeting her father had gone to every year, and for the first 20 minutes she felt like a child sitting in a room of adults, until a man named Ben Arledge approached her in the parking lot. Ben farmed 800 acres, 6 miles north, and had once borrowed Walter's grain cart during a wet harvest. He said, I heard about the Magnum. Mara braced. Ben said, my dad sold a combine the same week my mother died. Everybody thought he'd lost his mind. He had not. He had found the one bill he could cut before it ate the place. Mara let out a breath. She had not realized she was holding. Ben nodded toward her truck. Walter helped me finish beans in 2019 when I was down with pneumonia. You need a second set of hands this spring, you call. People might talk if you help me. They already talk, Ben said. Might as well make them jealous. For the first time in months, Mara laughed without feeling guilty. The tile work started in late March. Eli Voss and his crew worked through 9 days of damp weather, cutting narrow lines through the north bottom and laying black drainage pipe beneath ground that had fooled the farm for years by looking fine from a distance. Mara watched every day she could. She asked questions until Eli began answering the next one before she asked it. She learned where water hides. She learned how a field can fail quietly. She learned that some problems do not need a bigger machine. They need the right exit. On April 12th. After the final line was covered, Mara walked the north bottom alone. SFX, open field wind, distant creek. The ground was scarred in long, dark seams. The creek moved slowly beyond the fence. Wind bent the dry grass along the edge of the field. She stood where the worst water used to sit and thought about the red tractor. The sail had cleared the note. Clearing the note had opened the operating line. The operating line had paid for tile. The tile would make the bottom field earn what it should have earned years ago. A straight line, once she saw it, a hard line, but straight. That evening, Ruth Kincaid came over with tax papers and stayed for coffee. Mara spread the updated numbers across the kitchen table. Winter savings, cattle sale proceeds, drainage cost, field projections, fuel estimates, the new custom, work agreement Ben had offered for spring. Ruth studied them for a long time. You did not bring me coffee, she said finally. You brought me homework. Yes. Good. Mara waited. Ruth tapped the column showing the operating line. You have room. Some. Not much. No. But more than Walter expected by April. Yes, Ruth looked up. And what are you thinking? Mara folded her hands. Roy Granger called in December. He said he still had the Magnum. He said if the farm ever reached a point where the numbers worked, he would let me buy it back at what he paid me. Ruth's mouth tightened, but not in disapproval. Has he still got it? I don't know. I haven't asked. Why haven't you? Because selling it made everyone think I was heartless. Buying it back might make them think I don't know what I'm doing. Ruth stared at her. Do you? Do I what? Know what you're doing. Mara looked at the papers. I know why I sold it. I know what changed. I know what then that is your answer. Mara looked at her. Ruth leaned back in the chair. Your father did not sell that tractor because tractors are bad. He sold it because timing is a cost. If timing changes, the decision can change. He told me not to run the farm by county opinion. Then stop asking if the county will understand. Mara smiled faintly. Ruth added, for what it's worth, the people whose opinion matters mostly already do. How do you know? Because Ben Arledge told Amos that Walter Bell's girl has more sense than half the men at the co-op, and Amos repeated it twice before breakfast. Mara looked down, embarrassed by how much that meant. The next morning, she called Roy Granger. Roy had been selling equipment in that county for 24 years. He had sold Walter 3 tractors, 2 balers, and the Magnum. He had also bought the Magnum back on the morning when Mara had looked like she was signing away a piece of her father. When he answered, she said, "Roy, it's Mara Bell." There was a pause. Then Roy said, "I still have it." Pause. She closed her eyes. "You knew why I was calling, I hoped. Why didn't it sell?" "It almost did twice, once the financing fell through. Once I decided the buyer didn't need a tractor that big, and—" Mara laughed softly. Roy said, "I told you I'd give you first right if spring looked different." "I need terms," she said. "Not kindness terms. Your father raised you properly. He would say he tried." Roy put together the proposal by Friday. The number was exactly what he had promised. No markup, a longer payment schedule, a seasonal structure that matched crop income instead of monthly punishment. Mara took it to Patricia Yates at the bank on Monday morning. Patricia had handled Walter's accounts for 6 years, Nent's for 6 years. She was younger than most of the men who underestimated her, and better with risk than all of them. She read the proposal twice, then read Mara's updated cash flow. "The farm is in a stronger position than it was in October," Patricia said. "Because I sold the tractor." "Because you sold the tractor, cut expenses, and fixed the field that was bleeding yield. Can it carry the repurchase?" Patricia turned the page. "At the conservative projection, yes, tightly. At the mid-projection, comfortably enough. Not loosely. Do not hear loosely." "I don't." Patricia looked at her over the papers. "Your father would have approved this version of the decision." Mara felt something move in her chest. "That's what I needed to know." "No," Patricia said. "You already knew. You needed somebody in a chair with a bank logo to say it out loud." Mara smiled. "Maybe." 2 days later, the Granger implement truck came back up the Bell Lane. SFX, spring gravel, truck brakes, birds in the yard. This time, the weather was warm enough that the gravel dust lifted behind it. Ruth Kincaid watched from her own porch, instead of her kitchen window. Amos pretended to fix a gate so he could see. Ben Arledge slowed his pickup on the county road, and gave one honk as he passed. Mara stood in the open door of the equipment shed. The Magnum came down the ramp slowly, red paint flashing in the spring sun. It was not a miracle. It was not a sign. It was a machine returning to a farm that could now afford to use it. Roy climbed down and handed her the key. "Looks better coming this direction," he said. Mara took the key. The dealer tag was gone now. The tractor no longer looked untouched. It looked ready. She drove it into the North Bay herself. FX tractor engine fills the shed. Then settles. The engine filled the shed. The empty space disappeared, under weight, color, and purpose. But Mara did not forget what the emptiness had done. It had given her room to breathe. It had paid for the field. It had taught the county the difference between panic and discipline, though not all of them were willing to admit they had learned it. Most of all, it had taught Mara something her father had been trying to teach her even before he got sick. A farm is not preserved by keeping every object in place. A farm is preserved by knowing what each object costs, what each season needs, and when love has to look, for a while, like letting go. That evening, after Roy left and the yard went quiet, Mara sat in the tractor cab with the door open. She held Walter's key ring in one hand and the green binder in the other. On the first page, under Cash Flow Without Me, Walter had written one sentence in blue ink instead of pencil. Softly, keep the place alive first. Make it pretty later. Mara looked through the windshield at the north bottom, newly drained, dark with spring moisture, waiting. Then she turned the key. She had work to do.